Hello everyone, this is Fadi. Thank you so much as always, of course, for joining us to watch this exciting video series, the one we called The Search for Muhammad, or The Quest for the Real Muhammad, basically. And thank you for your interactions, your questions, and your comments. Today, so far I should say, we have addressed a number of historical problems related, for instance, to coins, rock inscriptions. But today we're going to talk about further, historical problems as evidence that there is some real holes in the narrative concerning Muhammad and his person and the historical, basically, Muhammad in this case. With that in mind, of course, I want to turn the focus here on Dr. J. Smith, who have been doing an amazing work really in this field, and you have been really doing a great job unpacking all of these difficulties. So what further evidence or problems in this case do we have?
Yeah, just to clarify, I'm not doing the research in this area. People like Mel, who is on Sneakers Corner, Murad, who's from the Middle East. We have Joe, who is also from England and also from Europe. We then also have Bala, who is in India, and then we have CIRA, who's down in the Southern Hemisphere. But these are people who have actually done a lot of the research. I'd already mentioned Odin LaFontaine. These guys and gals have been working on this material for over 20 years. All I'm doing is taking what they have introduced to me, thrown at me, and being their mouthpiece, because they need somebody who can actually get online, who can go up on the internet and actually communicate it so others can then appreciate it, but also use it in their own ministry or with Muslims that they're engaging with publicly. So that's all I am. I'm nothing more than that. Please don't think that I'm actually doing the journal research. I'm not capable of doing this kind of research. They're way ahead of me. And that's why it's so good to be able to impose and take their material and then get it out to the whole world. And what are they finding? And so here's some other historical problems. Let's just take and let's go up on the slide and let's look at the rightly guided caliphs, because certainly you would assume if there was a person named Abu Bakr who is living in Medina, was a caliph for 2 years, especially Umar, who comes after him from 634 to 644, that 10-year period, whereas Islam has moved its borders out. It's now moving across all the way out from the west. It's moving all the way out over to Afghanistan, moving in the east towards North Africa, getting across Egypt and all the rest. You would assume that people would know who these guys are. They caliphs, if they're caliphs, that means their name would be out there. The coins would have had their names on it. We know that didn't happen. The inscriptions would be referring to them. We know that didn't happen. But someone somewhere should know about these characters, these first rightly guided caliphs, as they call it. They call it the golden period of Islam. They call it the Rashidun period. Why did they call it? Because this is where Islam really took form. This is where it made a force for itself and expanded its borders. And as they conquered right, left, going both west and east, they then took over a lot of these cities, and they would have now, someone somewhere would have known about these guys. You would think. You would hope.
That's right.
That's what we are always looking for. So one of the things that this group of the researchers have been doing, and they've been working on this for about 5 to 10, some as many as 20 years, they've been asking this question: where are these rightly guided caliphs? And if you look on the screen there, they cannot find, first of all, they cannot find the 9th century Muhammad. So can we find these caliphs at least? There is no rock inscription in the 7th century which uses that term caliph to begin with. That's the first thing they noticed. More than that, the term which was used was Amir al-Mu'minin.
Amir al-Mu'minin, yeah.
Commander of the faithful, which does not denote a successor. So even the term caliph is not found in these rock inscriptions or any of these references from the 7th century. That term was not used. Yet today, we're using that term all the time to refer to these 4 characters. Or you might say Muhammad would be the first caliph from 624 up until he died in 632. The later term caliph was introduced as Caliphate by Rasulullah, means the successor of Messenger of God. That is introduced in the 8th and 9th century, not in the 7th century. So already you've got a problem here, because even the term it's in the wrong century. Okay.
So even the term, if these people existed, was applied to them later.
And when later? The 9th and 10th century applies it to them, which means it's a redaction back.
Exactly.
Again, here's another example of a redaction back. So, I was really hammered by Yusuf Qadi for getting the wrong name at the wrong in the wrong century. Well, how about him hammering the Islamic traditions for doing the same problem?
That's right.
They should have known better that this word would not have existed that early. So why are they calling him Caliph?
Maybe he should take a deep dive into this. Yeah.
Let's go back to the slide here. So what about any references to these first four caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali? Are there any references to these names? Now remember, these names are very popular names. So of course you're going to have references to people called these, but notice that not one of them is a caliph. These inscriptions refer to them. That's why their historicity is seriously in doubt. Every attempt has been made to get the story that straight has failed. We just cannot find these caliphs referred to anywhere. Abu Bakr, let's look at Abu Bakr. Could not have been a caliph because all the contradictory evidence rules that out. I don't have time to unpack that. Go look at Mel and what he has done with Abu Bakr and also Murad. Mel and Murad have done a great job just showing that Abu Bakr could not have existed because there is nobody called that name. Yes, there are people called that name, but they're nothing more than people who are writing receipts on things of people exchanging. There's no king or caliph referred, or in this case, no Amir al-Mu'minin who's called that. Oh, Umar. His history rests on one rock inscription that could be about anyone of that name. Just anybody. That's the only reference we can find for someone named Umar. He did exist. Someone did exist named Umar. But as we're finding with Muhammad, we're going to find later there is actually another Muhammad that existed in the 7th century, but it's not the Muhammad of the 9th century. He lived 100 miles too far north, and he was a Christian, and he was a king who was in charge of 30 cities. So you can see the difficulty is we can't place this Umar with anybody who is later or anybody who is earlier. Uthman, we can't find anything for him. There's nothing, no reference for him at all. So just throw him out. And then, of course, Ali of the 7th century. First of all, he was never a caliph. He was never any of that sort. He died 3 years before his reign was meant to even have ended. So you can see they've got the wrong Ali. He was a guy, but he was not a caliph, and he certainly was not anybody who is related to Muhammad.
So one thing is interesting here. Are you telling me Uthman, who is credited for the Uthmanic Rasm, the first canon of the Qur'an, is not referenced in any of these important inscriptions and other things?
Can't even find him. And this is why I keep on asking. I've been asking this since 1995. You keep on telling me about this guy named Uthman, and you keep on telling me about the fact that he had this Quran, and I've always asked for 25 years, can you show me where this guy exists to begin with? And secondly, can you show me where this Quran that supposedly he canonized in 652, can you please help me here? For 25 years I've asked this question, and nobody can show it. And all they can say, well, he's referred to, and if we look at all the references he's referred to, they refer back to him, and all these references where he's referred to come from the 9th and 10th century. And even the references to his Quran come from the 9th and 10th century. And finally, when we do get the manuscripts, and people like Tahir Atakulic and Ekmel Nisan, these two Turkish scholars from 2002 to 2007, finally look at these 6 major manuscripts, they have realized that these manuscripts don't even come from a guy named Uthman. They don't come from that time period. In fact, they're saying they don't even come from copies of that time period.
Right.
These are Muslim scholars, and they were saying this in 2007. We're now in 2020, and yet Muslims are not listening and not looking, and they still can't come up with anybody called Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. And that's why we need to be careful. If you're going to be talking about this, you need to come up with evidence. Now, what I'm going to do in the next episode, what I want to do is I want to actually look about the Hijrah. I want to go into the Hijrah, and then I also want to look at the 741 date. Well, I think that's enough for this one, because this is devastating in and of itself. Forget about Muhammad. We can't even find the guys that follow him. And we can't find anybody who is historical until Muawiyah.
Right.
Of what we would recognize as Muslim, if he were a Muslim. And what we now know about Muawiyah, as we saw in the coins, has nothing to do with Islam.
So, Jay, I'm a professor, you're a professor, we both teach, we even going to end up teaching in a similar program as well. Let's recap everything we've covered so far and tell people what to expect the remainder of this series. And this will be kind of like the pivot, if you wish.
Okay. We have gone back and we've said there is a problem with all of the emergence of Islam. This whole thing with trying to find Muhammad, we've looked for him, it's like trying to find Wali. At least you can find Wali. We can't find Muhammad anywhere. And we've said first, and I said one of the reasons why is that the Muhammad that everybody's looking for is a 9th and 10th century construct that is written hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away in some cases, because you're talking about Bukhara from Uzbekistan.
Right.
You're talking about Tabari from Tabaristan in what is today Iran, Uzbekistan today. These are hundreds, not just hundreds, but thousands of miles away. And so that's why you've got the wrong traditions. They're way too late and way too far north. that north-south divide that we've been talking about. So then we asked about the Quran. We asked about the Quran. What about the Quran? All these Qira'ats that start to appear in the 8th, 9th, and 10th century, they don't appear at all in the 7th century. The same problem again. Look at where those Qurans are. Look at those Qira'ats are. Every one of them is different. They all have different names, and those names and those men were only beginning to appear from 736 up until 905. Muhammad died in 632. You got the same problem, and look where they are mostly appearing in. 22 of the 30 are from either Basra or from Kufa or from up there in Damascus. 16 of them,
right.
And this is the difficulty. When you look and see, I mean, 12 of them, not 16, 12 of them are from just one city alone, Kufa, which is just near Baghdad. Well, today's Baghdad. Now, that's the problem with the traditions. That's the problem with the Quran. Then we went and we asked, what about the coins? Let's look at the coins. And we looked at the coins, and lo and behold, we couldn't find any reference to anybody called Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman. We couldn't find any reference to Muhammad. We couldn't find any reference to Islam or Muslims, or any reference to Mecca, or any reference to the Quran. Nothing at all until Abdul Malik introduces it in 692. Then we went to the rock inscriptions, and we asked the same thing with the rock inscriptions. Can you show us anything from the 7th century? This is what I said in the debate with David Wood. Over and over again, I kept on asking David Wood, please, one piece of evidence from the 7th century.
That's the most recent debate that you did
just
in
2
November.
weeks ago. Right. Just 2 weeks ago,
right.
Yeah. He could not come up with one piece of evidence. He just kept on talking about the traditions and about all the embarrassing stories, which is what he loves to do, and he loves to talk about those embarrassing stories. I don't care about those embarrassing stories anymore because they are not based on a historical person.
And by the way, I want to clarify, Jay is not fighting with David. They just wanted to, Jay wanted to highlight the fact that if you rely only on the traditional stories, you lack enough evidence to support the existence of Muhammad.
There you go. Yeah. And I can see the same thing could be done with Jesus Christ. Because if you want to look at the Gnostic accounts of Jesus Christ, like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which is written in the late 2nd century, it ridicules Jesus. It shows him as a real jerk. And he sits there, and not only does he use his magical powers to incapacitate people, he kills people with his magical powers. That's not the Jesus of the 1st century. That's a Jesus of the Gnostic Jesus from the 2nd century. If you want to use embarrassing stories for Jesus, right, be careful. I'm not going to do that with Jesus, and we need to be careful if we're going to do that with Muhammad. Let's go to the historical Jesus. Let's go to the historical Muhammad. And when you look at the historical Muhammad, you will see it does not exist at all. Now, we then went to the rock inscriptions. We saw the exact same thing pre-690. Nothing about Islam, nothing about Muslims, Islam, Muhammad, Mecca, or the Quran. Those 5 things we're looking for. 690 after, from 710, his name starts to appear. From 720 to 730, then you start seeing these practices appear. And then from 730 on, then you start seeing this religion called Islam, and Muslims start to appear. And that's where you see the Islam that we're starting to see. But it's still not complete. It's still not completing. That we won't get until the Abbasid era.
Right.
We're going to get to that yet. So what are we going to do next? We're going to look at the Hijrah. We're going to look at this inscription, the first reference to Mecca that Patricia Corona referred to, that kind of blew this whole thing out of the water when we realized that there's no reference to a city called Mecca until 741. But I'm going to look at something else that she didn't look at in 741. And then we're going to start moving into some of the other areas of what are the questions that Muslims, or what are the suppositions that Muslims like to throw at us. Because they are saying, no, there is some references to Muhammad. Let's look at those, and we'll debunk every one of them. And that's why we have an awful lot yet to do, because we need to get through all of this to try to really solidify that there is a problem with not only the book, but also with the man, the book and the man, the book and the man. And that is, I want to find a book from Uthman, I can't find it. We looked at the 5 canons that Shadi Nasser introduced. Looked at the canon from 652, that didn't exist. We looked at the canon from 936. It looks like there's only 7 there. They got the wrong 7. We looked at the canon of Shatabi from 1194, the 12th century. 14 of those canons that were introduced at that time, every one of them are
Ibn al-Jazari,
and then Jazari in 1429, and then finally we came back to the canon of 1924. In every case, we can see that this is an evolution of the text, this is an evolution of the canonization, an evolution of the Quran. The same thing we're finding with Muhammad. He evolved. He evolved from the Muhammad that we have yet to introduce the Muhammad that we do know of 7th century. Wait till you find him. That Muhammad is not the Muhammad of the 9th century. 2 completely different Muhammads. And I prefer the one of the 7th century. And I want nothing to do with the one of the 9th century. I agree with David. I agree with David and Sam Shamoun. They are doing right by confronting this guy because he's an embarrassment. He is an absolute embarrassment. Why is it that the Muslims forgot about the guy in the 7th century? We have yet to introduce him. That's yet to come.
Very good. Thank you so much. Of course, I wanted to do this to help people understand what we've covered and what to expect. And sometimes it's good to summarize things for them because, not everybody probably was following these arguments the way you put it logically right now. Well, thank you again, brother, for doing that. Thank you, everyone, for watching us. Until we meet again next time, have a blessed day. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. We can't make these quality videos without the help of partners like you. So please consider becoming a Patreon supporter today at patreon.com/CIRA International. I want to make sure you always get notified when we release a new video. So please click the bell to be notified, and of course, make sure to subscribe to this channel. If this video was helpful to you, please click the thumbs up. Thank you.